Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to continue our college football predictions with, I believe this is week 5 that we're in. Last week actually ended up a good week for me. I went 16 and 7 of the 23 games that I predicted. Total season record 32 and 26, so I am now above 500. Took me long enough. But anyway, with most of the non-conference schedules out of the way, we're now focusing on the conference portion of the season. And this is where things will get very, very interesting. Interesting enough, our first conference game we're predicting is Virginia Tech and Miami, which is the conference opener for, I believe, both teams. I think Virginia, correct me if I'm wrong, Virginia Tech might have played a game already. I don't think they did. But anyway, Virginia Tech, rough week last week. They lost to Rutgers at home. In Miami, they played a no-name school, fought a rain delay. Actually, it was not a no-name school. It was South Florida, but they had to fight a rain delay before tuning in. Miami's currently almost 20-point favorites in this one. They're projecting Miami to win big. I also think Miami is going to win, but I am very concerned about that spread. Next up, we have is the University of Washington taking on the Rutgers Scarlet Knight. Washington got a win on their first Big Ten game, beating Northwestern without giving up a touchdown. It was like 24-5 was their final score. Rutgers going on the road, getting a win against Virginia Tech. Impressive. And with this game being at Rutgers, they're really giving them 2.5 points. So yeah, this is a bit of a tricky one for me. And given my bad luck I've been going through, especially with these non-Saturday games, I'm gonna roll with Washington to win this game. I do believe Washington's going to win, and Rutgers, I won't be surprised if they pulled it off. They are favored. And starting off with the Saturday lineup, we have the Minnesota Golden Gophers taking on the Michigan Wolverines. And what we know from Michigan was, despite not really having a passing game, they ran down USC's throat in this one, proving to everyone that, hey, we're still here. Yeah, we might have lost the game already, but we're still here. And you know what? Minnesota's not really that interesting for me to talk about. I'm just gonna go ahead and roll with Michigan to win. It's at Michigan. They shouldn't have a problem here. And next up we have is the University of Maryland taking on the Indiana Hoosiers. Indiana has been a quiet surprise for me at the start of this season, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. They are currently 4-0. They already won a conference game this year, beating UCLA 2 weeks ago. And I know one game they put up 77 points against a non-conference opponent. That's impressive. Maryland, on the other hand, it's hard to gauge what kind of team they are. I mean, they're not bad. I don't think they're that good either. They're the definition of a middle of a pack team. Indiana's favored by 7 points. I'm actually am going to go ahead and take Indiana to win, but I won't be surprised if Maryland wins. Next up we have is BYU taking on Baylor. BYU has been one of the most sneakiest teams in the early portion of the season. So a couple weeks ago they were double digit underdogs against SMU. They came back and won. And then this past week they were once again nearly double digit underdogs against Kansas State at home. And they not only beat them, but they destroyed them. That's why they finally make an appearance in the top 25 polls. Meanwhile, Baylor, they got a win over. Wait, no, they didn't. They lost to Colorado. But they made it a really close fight, as I predicted. I thought the game was going to be very, very close. And Baylor, for some reason, is favored by 3.5 points. That part does confuse me a bit. But I've been doubting BYU for so long. I am going to go with them to win this game. And now that I picked them, watch Baylor blow them out. Now we have Nebraska taking on Purdue. And Nebraska, tough loss against Illinois at home. And Purdue, I think they're pretty much the worst team in the Big Ten. They're giving Nebraska 10 points. They're going to probably win, but it's at Purdue, so maybe there's a shot for them, I guess. And then we have what should be a good game in the Big 12, Oklahoma State taking on the Kansas State Wildcats. Oklahoma State had a tough loss against Utah, and Kansas State. What happened to them against BYU? What has happened? But anyway, this one's a bit of a toss-up for me. I know Kansas State is favored by 6 points. I'm actually going to lean towards the upset and pick Oklahoma State to win, because I believe last week we saw the two best teams in that conference. That's my unpopular opinion, but I think Oklahoma State and Utah are the two best teams in the conference. I have a feeling that we're going to see those two teams in December. And yeah, I'm actually going to roll with Oklahoma State to win on the road to get a bounce back win. And this brings us right into the University of Kentucky taking on Ole Miss. First conference game for Ole Miss, as they've been playing cupcake school after cupcake school. Although Wake Forest is a Power 5 school that they easily took care of on the road. Kentucky, they finally scored their first offensive touchdown since week 1. Already 0-2 in the conference. That's a big sign of concern. I'll say that. But Ole Miss, yeah, I do think they're one of the sleeper teams in the SEC. I'm going to go ahead and pick them to win. Also, I think they do play Georgia later on this year. Outside of that, Ole Miss has a very favorable path to the playoff. And then we have the Arkansas Razorbacks taking on the Texas A&M Aggies. And like with this rivalry, this game will be taking place in Jerry World. Hopefully, both of these teams will be striving to have more wins in that building than the Cowboys do so far. Arkansas coming off the road, getting a win against Auburn. Granted, that's not really that hard to do because Auburn isn't that good of a football team this year. I don't know why. And then meanwhile we have Texas A&M, whom they got a win last week against a smaller school, but 2 weeks ago they beat Florida on the road. Maybe that's a good sign to come. And A&M's favored by 3.5 points. Oh boy. And looking at this game, this is another one I think can go in any direction. This should be a really good matchup. I am going to lean towards A&M to win. I almost said I usually lean towards the home team, but this game's a neutral site. So, what can I say? I think A&M is the slightly better team here, but Arkansas is going to give them a run for their money. I do expect that to happen. And then we have an early contender for game of the week this week. The Louisville Cardinals taking on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Louisville getting a win over Georgia Tech, and I actually went against them on a spread. A blocked field goal blew my entire life savings. No, it didn't, but I did win against Louisville on the spread. But Notre Dame, they beat up Miami 28-3. Ohio of Miami. And now Notre Dame's going to be tested against the first of 5 ACC opponents that they play every year. They are favored by 6.5 points. And if I recall, the last time we saw these two teams was last year. In Louisville, they mollywopped them. So much that Jack Harlow stormed the field with the students. So with this game, I do think this is going to be a really good battle. I think the 6.5 spread that they got is a bit of a reach. And I'm actually going to go with Louisville to win this game. Because Louisville has proved to me that they're one of the underrated teams in the ACC, which is not having a really good year this year. And there is a path for them to make it to Charlotte and play in that title game. I'll say that. And then we have the Colorado Buffaloes taking on the UCF Knights. And Colorado, they got relied on a Hail Mary against Baylor to get a win. And for UCF, they I don't recall what they did, but I remember 2 weeks ago they played TCU and won a high scoring game. This game, wow, they're giving UCF a lot of points. I am gonna go at looking at that alone. I'm gonna roll with UCF to win. I love their offense. Colorado, something about them is just not gelling. It might probably is their bad offensive line or the fact that they don't win in the trenches. That's what I think is holding them back for Colorado. And next up we have is the Wisconsin Badgers taking on the USC Trojans. Wisconsin, last time we saw them was 2 weeks ago. They had a bye week last week. Sadly for them, their quarterback Tyler Van Dyke, he's out for the year with a knee injury, and that sucks to happen. Meanwhile, USC, they lost to Michigan, but it was a hard fought game. It was one of those games where someone had to lose. It happens. But so looking at this game, given that Tyler Van Dyke is out for the year, I don't have faith in Wisconsin's backup options. I think USC will rebound to get a win. And next up, we have TCU taking on the Kansas Jayhawks. And I believe this game is going to be in Arrowhead. Now, I know Kansas, they had to play a couple games at the soccer field. And this game, and then they're going to spend the rest of their season in Arrowhead, I guess. Because of I think their stadium's still getting renovated. But anyway, Kansas blown yet another lead. This time against West Virginia. TCU, I mean, they put up 42 points against SMU. That's good. The problem was SMU scored 66 points against you. So I do think this is going to be a very, very high scoring game. Both teams, I feel like, are teams that cannot get out of their own way. I'm going to go with Kansas to win because I think there's a sense of desperate. I feel like Kansas is getting a little desperate this year, given that they lost three of them against Power 5 opponents. They do not want to go back to the dark ages that they had in the 2010s. I think Kansas is probably going to win this one, but TCU, I expect a lot of points in this one. This is going to be a shootout. Then we have two disappointing teams in the SEC, Oklahoma and Auburn. Oklahoma, they lost to Tennessee. Jackson Arnold looked pretty much lethargic on the field. So much he got benched in favor of a true freshman. I believe his name is Hawkins. Correct me if I'm wrong. Auburn, they already benched Peyton Thorne, and they're playing someone else. But they can't went to play it at home, and they lost to Arkansas. I don't even know where this game's gonna go. You know what? Might be a flip of the coin here. I'm gonna roll with Oklahoma to win, and whatever happens, happens. And then we have, if this was a basketball game, everyone will know who I'll be picking. Carolina versus Duke, the biggest rivalry in basketball playing on the gridiron. And Duke, let's talk about Duke first, because they've played 4 games so far, but they're only with non-conference opponents. Some of them being very lesser than outside of Northwestern, maybe. They've been pretty lesser opponents. Meanwhile, Carolina, good news was they put up 50 points against James Madison. The bad news was they gave up 70 points to lose that game, which is the most points they ever given up in a home game, and it ties the most all time, which was like 10 years ago against East Carolina. I really do remember that game. And the sad thing about it was Carolina's defense had a bit of promise like a couple weeks ago, week 1. And then for them to lay an egg. Now, part of the issue was offense kept turning the ball over. They had special team blunders. And James Madison had a short field. That's how they quickly inflated that 70 points. But they gave up 53 in the first half. That is very, very concerning for that defense. But Duke is favored by 2.5. I'm really tossed up. But given that now if this was basketball, And given how much I hate Duke, I don't hate a lot of things. I don't use that word hate lightly, but I hate Duke in anything. My bias is going to pick Carolina to win. I think they're going to rebound. Defense is going to get. I feel like the defense is going to have a much improved performance. And if Carolina can get that running game going, they can expose Duke as the frauds that they are. Following that, yeah, let's just skip this one. Texas better win by like 60. And following that, we have Stanford taking on Clemson. Stanford winning their first ever ACC game at Syracuse on a Friday night. That is very impressive for me. Clemson, yeah, sure, they put up 59 points against State, but I felt like they let off the gas a little bit in the second half because it was like 35 to 59 was the final score. So the scoreboard didn't really tell the story of that game. Clemson, after getting blown, have anyone noticed that Clemson, after getting blown out by Georgia week 1, has slowly started to hit their stride? And I think this game will be no different. I think Clemson should walk the dog on Stanford. But I hope Stanford do put up a decent battle. Maybe not cover. Who cares? But I'm going to roll with Clemson. Following that, we have Iowa State taking on Houston. Houston's very terrible. I'm just going to roll with Iowa State to win. And then we have Ohio State taking on Michigan State. I'm not really that enthused about Michigan State. Ohio State better win by like 30. Next up we have is Illinois taking on Penn State. The Illini picking up a big road win over Nebraska. And that game was on the road and it was on a Friday night, which is very tough to do in college football. I tip my hat to you, Illinois. Meanwhile, Penn State, they've been all over the place this year. There will be some games where they blow out West Virginia by like 30 something points. Then the next week they'll proceed to barely escape Bowling Green by 3 points. I wish Penn State would find some consistency for them. And oh boy, I just end up realizing the last time these two teams played, we saw one of the great offensive spectacles in 2021. A game that went into 9 overtimes, if I'm correct. Might have been 8, but oh boy, I was just reminded of that game looking at it. So this game, so I am going to roll with the home team. I'm going to go ahead and pick Penn State to win. But Illinois, this is probably going to be a victim of a someone will have to lose game. That's what I'm seeing. This will be one of those type of games where somebody's just going to have to lose. And following that, we have the Cincinnati Bearcats taking on Texas Tech. I don't really have much to say about either team. All I know is that Cincinnati shut out Houston, which is not that hard to do. Texas Tech is favored by 3 points. They're at home. I'm just going to lean towards them. Now we have Florida State taking on SMU. Congratulations, Florida State. You finally won a game. You beat California 14-9. But for this point for Florida State, they're just going to take what they can get. SMU put up 66 points against TCU. And for them, this is their first ACC game. Now, I know looking in the preseason, looking at this game, this was going to be a big test for SMU. But now that Florida State is kind of underwhelming this year, anything goes. I am going to give the slight edge to SMU because they put up all those points last week. And I don't have the confidence of Florida State putting up that many to keep up with. And then we have Arizona taking on Utah. Arizona, I think they had a bye week last week, but they were shellacked against Kansas State last time we saw them. And Utah picking up a big time conference win over Oklahoma State. And right now it's looking like the Utes run the Big 12 in their first year already. I don't believe in right now. I'm not believing in Arizona so far this season. They have let me down. I think Utah with that defense, they shouldn't have any problems here. And following that, we have Oregon taking on a rebuilding UCLA. Let's just go ahead and pick Oregon. We're not going to waste much time here. And finally, not only this might be the game of the week, this is probably the game of the year. We have the number 2 ranked Georgia Bulldogs taking on the number 4 ranked Alabama Crimson Tide. Georgia, they played their first conference game both teams had a bye week last week. They played their first conference game 2 weeks ago, and oh boy, it did not look good. Yes, they won 13-12 against Kentucky, but the offensive play calling has been mediocre at best for them. Meanwhile, Alabama, they're pretty much hitting their stride. I know Nick Saban's not there, but the offense have been looking pretty good. Sure, they beat a hobbled Wisconsin Badger team a couple weeks ago, but Milroe, he's looking like a quiet Heisman contender, and that Ryan Williams freshman guy, he's really nice. He's gonna be something in a year or two. He might be something right now. Now on the outside, Georgia's favored by 2 points, which I'm not that surprised that they are. They have faced off slightly more competition than Alabama. But for me, Alabama has actually looked like the better team. And I know College Game Day, they're loathing at this game. Their ESPN is pretty much having a hard on for this. I'm actually going to roll with Alabama to win. This game's being played in Tuscaloosa. I know Georgia wants revenge for last year, giving them their only loss that kept them out of the postseason. Georgia was perfect prior to taking on Alabama. But right now, Georgia, if that offense is stalling out and the play calling is very questionable, I can't see it happening. So therefore, that concludes my college football predictions. Tell me what y'all think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Please gamble safely, and I'll see you next time.